I think you're right in the sense that, yeah, we are living in the results of a fatherless generation. But I also think that because we're kingdom people, we need to call those things that are not as though they were.
If you want to be free, then today's your opportunity to go up a level with me.
Come on, y'all.
My kings and queens.
PLOW. You got to plow just to work for the revenue.
Everybody, hey, welcome back to Level Up. It's your boy J Miles with Up a Level. Hey, I'm so glad that you came today. Say today. Y'all know we have to do today. I got two guests on here that you are going to not want to miss. I have back my boy, Mr. E. Come on, B, what you doing, B?
I'm ready for you, man.
B, what you doing, man?
I'm ready for you.
I got the Sons of Thunder coming live to us today, man. Guys, what's up, man? Y'all good?
Oh, we were happy. We're ready. We're ready
Today,
to roll.
y'all, watch this. We're going to do, it's Father's Day week. I want to do what it means to father just this generation, yo. I really feel like right now we're living in a fatherless generation that we don't have a lot of fathers. Matter of fact, Ernie, I know Paul talks about that. There's a lot of teachers, but not many fathers. But before I even go there, I want to actually bring Malachi 4 and 6, where it says that the heart of the children will go back to the fathers, and the son's heart will go back. I'm sorry, the sons will go back to the father's heart, and the father's heart will go back to the sons. I really feel like we're in that time right now. And I just believe that God wants to really let us know who he is, the type of father, the type of daddy that we actually have. You mentioned it, Ernie, in one of our episodes of God's name being the source and provider, the Father, a source and provider. And that's what we have been called to do as well, because we have the same image, right?
Right.
We talked about the conclusion. If I have his image, I am made exactly like he has made me to be, wonderfully created in his image.
Correct. Genesis 1:26 and 1:27.
Come on.
We're created in his image and his likeness,
Yes.
right? And so we've established the fact that God holds nothing back, right? So the only thing you can do when you agree with what he says, the only right thing to do is to respond to it and then to behave like he says we are.
Come on.
Right? That's the deal. And so, I think you're right in the sense that, yeah, we are living in the results of a fatherless generation. But I also think that because we're kingdom people, we need to call those things that are not as though they were.
Yes.
Right? Because the one thing you got to understand about kings and sources is kings have to be very careful what they say. Kings are not, they're very dangerous when they speak, because what they speak becomes law.
Yeah.
Right? So they can't just publicly just be saying things to say things. Right? We're referred to as ambassadors, right? An ambassador is someone who's sent from the homeland to another piece of land, real estate, to represent the homeland.
Yes.
Right? So God sent us from heaven to the earth to represent heaven.
Yeah.
Right? So we're ambassadors.
Yes.
So we represent the source. So one thing that's peculiar about ambassadors is that if an ambassador of one country goes to another country, whatever piece of property he's managing, that, for instance, if we go to another country and there's a United States ambassador, that piece of property is United States territory in that other country.
Yeah.
Right? So the one thing that's peculiar about an ambassador is an ambassador cannot speak on his own. An ambassador is not allowed to have his own opinion. He can only speak what his king or what his country is saying. So if he misrepresents his country in public, he gets recalled. Right? So when we recognize the image and we line up with it and we understand these things, everything that we do changes the way we see, the way we talk, right? Because we take more responsibility for our words. Because in our tongue is the power of life and the power of death.
Yes.
So if we continue to confess the problem, then we'll always be dealing with the problem.
And never find a solution.
And you'll never go to the solution because you're just always confessing the problem.
Wow. That's good. That's good. B, what you got over there, man? What's up? Talk to us, B.
Well, I mean, when I was just sitting here a little while ago, man, I was realizing that a father is so, and I don't know how high we're gonna go with this, but a father takes many more than one place of position, right? And I have to take it to the scriptures. John 5:7 says, "But since you don't believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe in what I say?" That to me prophetically means that the Jews didn't know him as father because they only believe in what he said based on what was written and not based on an audible voice. So father doesn't just talk to you through the internet, but he shows up.
Yeah.
And there's always been that divine father of functioning in every realm, right? The earthly realm, the spirit realm, and the heavenly realm. And we've limited God based on a practical level to where all we see him is in the scriptures, and yet we have no visitation, we have no sensitivity of how he speaks. We haven't taken on his divine nature, because when you read a book, it's just like reading a text message. Yeah. Are they laughing? Are they mad? Are they upset?
That's good.
So a father so another identity of God had to have been father, because it is one who also sits with his children.
Yes.
Right? And that has never left. So the thing that I want to go about is that, how does that affect us today? Is that if you still just look at the scriptures and say, if it's not written in the Bible, then it's not God.
Yeah.
Then this is where a lot of people struggle, right? We spend more time with a convicted mind, always repenting, than rather with a redeemed mind, always building. And that has a lot to do because a father builds fathers out of sons.
Yes.
He never keeps his sons at a level of sonship.
Yeah.
He always raised his kids and he's talked to them as if they were already a king.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me take you somewhere. I want to take you somewhere with me for a minute. Let's just go on this quick journey. I was sitting at home one time and I heard this laughing. It was sounding like it was King Kong laughing. And this has happened to me a few times. Yeah. Laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. And it was just a laughter, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to take you somewhere. There's a scripture that says, Psalms 27, that God laughs because he sits in the heavens. And he sits as the great king on a glorious throne. And he doesn't pace back and forth in the throne room in heaven, wondering what he shall do next. When I had this visitation of the Lord laughing, just in the laughing, it began to speak to me, right? So when we begin to read the Psalms 27, he says that God laughs because he sits on the throne. It's just like if a person that is on trial, he's trying to tell the judge how wrong he is. And the judge is laughing. Why? Because he's like, I'm the one in authority. Yes. I have all power. I have all dominion. And you're going to sit here and try and waver me? So the laughter of God is a reminder to mock the enemy, to bring an identity in his laugh, to allow them to know who he is in his ruling and reigning, right? Yeah. This is the thing, though. This is powerful. So the impression when I had that visitation of laughter, y'all remember the walls were vibrating, the floor it was almost like the walls and the floor and the sheetrock and all the furniture all collaborated in a language. Like they could all, everything could talk to each other.
Intertwining, basically.
And the reason why they do that is because when you take a form of a table, we talked about this last time, yeah. It is a lower part of a vibration, what is a particle. In between a particle, when you have molecules, atoms, and neutrons, protons, all of these things, you have the voice of God and you have math in between, which hold things into a lower part. So you're seeing a lower part of a particle, which is we begin to call furniture. Yeah. But it's actually a lower part of his voice. So when you begin to take this to the higher level of the highest vibration, it comes back into a realm of vibration of a frequency. So everything is created from the laughter of God, right? Yeah. He laughed us and he sang us into existence. That's one of the greatest things about the Father. But one of the things that I had wrote down is that one of the things about his laughter, he was telling me that there is rest in his laughter. Right? How many of y'all know that we've been dealing with an angry father theology? Yeah. Right? That, man, I'm not good enough, or always repenting, and we're always like, I got to go to church, and I got to give more. And all of this has a lot to do with the way that we build our culture.
And be real quick, you just said it, the culture.
Yeah.
And one of the episodes that you and I had done, you had mentioned about the culture, man, about how we were raised, and I believe you were saying, like, with the Hispanic culture, it's very emotional.
Yeah.
Even our culture as Black African Americans, we're very emotional as well too. You know, so I feel like, again,
Dramatic.
Yeah, we are definitely we all are dramatic.
You're just
at some
outward
point.
emotional.
Right, outward. And again, we feel like we have to do something extra, like you said earlier, to gain God's favor.
Turn the stereo louder.
Louder.
The bigger rims.
We got to dance harder. We got to do all these things.
But it's an expression of love, right?
It is.
Yeah.
But we still kind of don't know any better, so to speak. But I'm saying that point because we sometimes allow our emotions to make us feel like we're doing something.
Yeah.
And that, oh, you know what? I felt this feeling like, but was it really emotional? Because you're going back to do the same thing that you were just doing. It was just an emotional reaction.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point, and definitely so much meat on and substance on what Brandon is saying.
Yeah.
But when you look at this, it's like the Bible talks about, leaving the immature things, leaving the childish things, and going on to be immature, right?
Yes.
So one of the things is this, a lot of times people's motivations are different as they grow older, right?
Yeah.
So talk about the dancing. A lot of people will do it to get attention, right? Which can be hiding an unhealthy conclusion.
Yeah.
Right? When you get older, you're doing it now because that's who you are. So when you do things immaturely, you're doing it to get the attention to cover up something that you feel you're lacking.
Expound on that right there, man, because that's I feel like a lot of us face insecurities from that.
Correct. Yeah. So, it's I can tell you for a lot of years personally, I experienced it myself, and it was of no fault of anybody. I can't say, my mom or my dad or whatever. It was just the fact of all of society, teachers, friends, being picked on, being treated certain ways, whatever. You start to develop an identity and come to conclusions about yourself, and so then you say, well, in order to be in order to be validated, in order to you behave a certain way because you're coming to wrong conclusions about yourself. Yeah. When you identify with what God says as you mature, then what everybody else thinks and says has doesn't have a big as impact on you, because now you're walking in the security, the identity that you were created in, not the security and identity to be validated by other people. Yes. Right? And so now you have your foundation is on stable ground, and so you don't have to behave certain ways because you're trying to manipulate your purpose. Sometimes who we are in private doesn't match up how we're presenting ourselves in public. You can be deeply hurting in private, and you could be exuberant and emotional in public and accepted, but that's not really who you are in private. And standing naked before God, I've said this, you've heard me say this before, have you ever met yourself? And if you met yourself, would you like yourself? But the other thing about meeting yourself is, have you ever met the person that God created, not the person that everybody expects you to be, right? And so those are the keys, is that we have to understand that we have to become comfortable in our own skin.
Yes. Right?
We have to become comfortable in who God created us to be. It's Father's Day, right? We're talking about this whole issue of father, the things that Brandon brought to the table. We're brought into this kingdom by the spirit of adoption.
Yes.
Right? Something very powerful about adoption is that if we were to adopt a child, we go prepare the room, prepare the house and everything, the excitement of this child or this, person to come into our life. When the first day the child gets there, he's doesn't know how to act, how to behave. He's not familiar with it. You take him to the room, you say, this is your room, these are your toys. And he's like, I'm barely sitting on the bed. But after about a week, 2 weeks, Now all of a sudden he's got friends in the neighborhood. He said, hey, why don't y'all come to my house? Why don't y'all come play with my toys?
Yes.
So all of a sudden the power of adoption takes a hold of it, and he starts to identify with the parents of that adoption. And it starts becoming his. He takes ownership.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the way that the power of adoption has to be in the kingdom, is that we're not foreigners. We're not strangers.
No.
We're sons.
We're sons.
And yeah, so at some point we got to take ownership and participate with what's available to us.
That's good.
Because you become comfortable.
That's good.
Right?
Yes, yes. B, I know you over there itching. Go ahead, man.
No, so I feel like we need to come into this season of the return of the joy of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Because the only memory we should have is a happy father, a joyful family. One of the things that I wrote down is that when the Lord told me, when he was laughing, the first thing he says is, I am too big for you. And I said, man, what do you mean? And he's laughing, right?
Yeah.
So he says, what are we doing? And I says, I'm walking with you. He says, yeah. So laughter is also a sign that I am with you, right? So it's a father that remembers,
Yes.
right? We don't, and so he's, even in his laughter, you become drunk in the spirit. To where drunk to me is you're in the spirit.
Yeah.
Being drunk, you're under the influence. When you're drunk, you don't. What happens? All your feelings and emotions leave you,
Yeah.
and now you're just laughing at everything because there's just such a sense of joy. And this is the couple of things that I wrote down when he says, "I am too big for you," and he was laughing. And in his laughter, he was teaching me. He says, "Your negative is his positive," and an example for that is there's always a solution with me. That's part of his laughter. That's part of his rule and the adoption is that there's always a solution with me.
Always, yeah.
You can laugh your way out of a sickness. You can laugh your way out of
Yes.
money loss. You can anything that we have lost. Actually, it's actually a command to stay in joy. Why is that such a command? Because it's against the kingdom to live lower than the identity of heaven.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Is this good? Are y'all getting this? Come on.
So when the Father teaches you, number one in Proverbs it says that the feasting of my children will live on nothing less than my greatness. We talked about that last time, right? So the children accept nothing less than greatness, which means what? That you don't have to live from your father's failures and your grandfather's all the mistakes. As a matter of fact, a father spends 90% with his kids and the education realm spends 10%. But the father's identity is so profound that it says to grow your children up into the ways of the Lord, right? To bring them up into the ways of the Lord. So the kingdom is stamped on the identity, and your job as a father is to stamp that identity on your children. So you can't blame the education. In other words, what God is saying is don't worry about the evolution and the science and all of that, because your job is to stamp the joy of the Lord on them, which would define what they will already know what evolution is and what science is. You know, we have this big old thing is like the world is coming to an end and it's so dark.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's you know, if you're seeing it without the Spirit of God, then it is dark. But
Well, that's good, B, because that's what me and Ernie was talking about, the conclusions of what we come to, of how we actually see it. So, man, thinketh in his heart. So is
yeah,
he, right?
So even in his laughter, when he was saying that even in your negative, I have positive for you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The other thing is this, is that there's never a loss in the kingdom. So if you're an extension of the Father, which means what? It's that you carry the same genetics as him, how can you lose?
Yeah. You can't.
You can't lose.
No.
And these are the things that we got to define that the Father has always shown himself to be, right? So also it says that it means that you're walking side by side with him. And another thing is that he wants to train us to see out of the redeemed mind. So laughter keeps you on the redemptive mind of seeing everything before man put a hand on it, before man teached, before man put an opinion. Anything outside of what God says should be a laughter to us.
Check out the Redeeming the Time episode with me and B on that. Go ahead, B. Yeah. Yep. And
So I think that evidence is meaningless to those who willfully resist the truth. If you always feel like you need evidence, the evidence in the kingdom is his word.
Yeah.
He spoke it and it's truth. There's nothing outside of that. We're praying for discernment instead of using truth to discern.
Well, what did Jesus say? Blessed are those that believe and are not able to see.
Correct.
That's right.
It's what you're believing.
But our culture wants evidence. How do I know God is here?
How do I know?
Why did God put me through what? And this affects the next fathering generation. I remember one time my dad was around the fire at the ranch. For many of y'all who don't know this, my father has it's about 40 acres, says it's a ranch, but and the neighbors all their parenting, their fathers and mothers were divorced, right? And so when they were about 8, 9 years old, they were talking, and my dad was giving us some deer meat and all that.
Yeah.
And their conversation was, man, when I grow up, all I want to do is make sure I pay my child support on time.
Wow.
Because that was their language. Because they always hear how they couldn't go see their father because they didn't pay child support. So it became embedded into their language.
Yeah.
To where there's already a hope for hopelessness before they even become into an adulthood, because we've already portrayed a language of hopelessness and forgetfulness. So I feel like the laughing of the Lord is being reinstated, and I believe it's coming in through Joel 2:28, that all may prophesy. What does that mean? That prophecy and the prophetic is a symbol and a sign that God is still active in his word.
Yeah. That's good. What you got, Big? What you got, E?
No, I agree 100%. I think that there's there's a lot of substance in that. There's, one of the things that I was sitting here, I think there's a lot of people that have, basically disqualified their fathers because of relationship, or basically even disqualified seeing God as their father because they didn't have that father experience, right? Or a healthy father experience.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that I would like to release, during this time is that humans can only do what they've been taught and what they buy into.
Yeah.
So your father experience, you may look for somebody to blame, but even if you found somebody to blame, a lot of times it's going back to the wrong conclusions of that individual. So in order for you to be released in the power of your new experience with God, you got to release that person that maybe didn't know, came to wrong conclusions. And what Brandon was to piggyback on what Brandon was saying is, allow redemption to do its work in your own life.
Yes.
Allow forgiveness to do the work, that the same power that you were forgiven in is the same power that you should be able to exude and forgive.
Can I piggyback on that real quick too? And one of the previous episodes that we did was moving without the ball. And in that, I always usually talk about forgiveness. And me and B talked about this one time, and it's the reason why we forgive in the kingdom to forego.
Correct.
To keep foregoing
That's
on
right.
and not staying.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's necessary, Ernie, for us to be able to let loose things to keep going on, man.
Well, it's even more empowering to hear it this way, right? We've all been given the same 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right? So people, riches, poverty come by the way you manage your time.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're managing your time, managing unforgiveness, right?
Yep.
Managing things that are not part of your inheritance.
Correct.
Steals from you, steals joy.
Wow. Can you imagine though we're at work or we're somewhere
Correct.
still
And
thinking about the same cycle thing that we have not let go
Yeah,
yet,
you're not let
man.
go. So it's consuming you.
It's consuming you.
Yeah.
It's eating everything.
So
in you.
basically, it becomes more powerful than anything God's trying to embed in your life. So you don't get the benefit. So here's the thing about benefits. You can get positive benefits, and they won't. Positive repercussions. Negative repercussions and positive benefits.
Yeah.
So you're over here managing something that's going to bring negative repercussions instead of allowing God and the benefits of the kingdom and the king and that's that's what you manage. You manage the benefits, not all this bad stuff that you're managing. You're wasting your time and all your energy, and it's stealing your joy just because. I mean, you walk into a grocery store, you see somebody you got odd against,
Yeah.
and you got to manage yourself because you're gonna shoot to the other aisle to avoid that. Right? I mean, you don't have the freedom to walk down an aisle.
Right, because you're still holding it.
You don't have the freedom.
I don't. Yeah, you don't have it.
Yeah. Even though that person legitimately offended you, you're the one in bondage because you can't walk down that aisle because of so and so.
And now we didn't block a whole different.
Correct.
Come on, Ernst, stop. We didn't block the whole different funnel.
And you're managing all of that.
Wow.
You're managing all of that anger, all that hurt, all that unforgiveness, and that's instead of managing the inheritance.
So we call it going to a class of anger management, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Why should you manage your anger? You're not supposed.
We're not. And this is good for mental health right now. Why are we going to manage our anger when we need to let everything loose of where we even got the root from it?
Correct. Yeah, when you go to Galatians chapter 5, you talk about the five the deeds of the flesh. Yeah. And one of them is outbursts of anger. Right? And then at the end it says, and those shall not enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
So you're managing, that list, anybody who's participating with those doesn't get to participate with the kingdom. The kingdom can be all around you.
Yes.
And you won't participate with it because you're managing the flesh.
Wow. We better conclude this one, man. What you got? But you got anything
Well,
else
I think I got a couple of things. Number one, we always hear when you read the scriptures for those that are Bible readers, right?
Yeah.
That says see, right? Watch and see what I do, or I put a table in the midst of your enemies. And when you hear that word see, this is what God is saying.
Take your time.
It says, seeing has all the abilities of seeing only the way the Father sees.
Yeah.
Not on how you see how things should be justified.
Correct.
So without you seeing the way the Father sees, you'll miss the principles, or you'll miss that missing puzzle that's going to complete you to your destiny, because we're saying, in my eyes, this is how I think things should be justified.
Correct.
Conclusion.
That's right. So seeing is seen out of both realms. You have the ability to see on where I'm seated, but you also have the ability to see how I'm seen. You should be seen from the realm that you function in.
Correct.
That's why we're a tri-dimensional being, right? Now this is what's important. There's one thing in having trouble in your heart or being in transition in your identity. Let me say that again. There's one thing in having trouble in your heart or being in transition in your identity, but there's another having trouble and not being in your identity. How do we distinguish when you're in your identity and you're having a crisis, and you're out of your identity having a crisis? And it's a simple answer. Number one, the example is that you will always, when you are in your identity and you're having a crisis or you're going through things in your life, you'll always fix yourself. You'll always have the ability to fix yourself. You'll always be able to build others around you. You'll always to be able to adjust what is true. That is huge. You'll always revert back to truth. That's the sign that I'm in my identity, but I'm having a crisis.
Is this good?
That's good.
Guys, let's continue this actually next week. We're gonna just pause real quick. We'll be back next week. But until then, be the change, because you are the change for such a time as this. Until next time, level up. Up a level. Let's do it. If you want your mind to be free, level up, y'all. And see the kingdom with me. Where's it at? It's inside of you. It's inside of me. That's right. So let go and let God be free. If you want to be free.